Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Maruti Suzuki's chairman, R.C. Bhargava, ladies and gentlemen, on the podium.
And he's joined
Very warm welcome, sir.
And he'll be joined by TV9 Network's Rakesh Khar and Sudha Sananan to conduct this session. And while he takes his seat, just before his session, I was told, in the world of automobile industry, you don't CC, you RC. That is the significance of his legacy in the automobile sector in India. Over to you, Rakesh and Sudha.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure to have Mr. Bhargava with us, a legend himself in the automobile industry, someone who's been driving the corporate India story for the last 40 years, having served in the bureaucracy earlier with great distinction. Sudha, over to you. You can start.
Yeah. What a pleasure this is, and namaskar to you, sir. I mean, you know, we need more and more legends like you to show us the way, show us the path. With your permission, sir, if I may start. Thank you very much. Mr. Bhargava, today's theme is, of course, India sustaining the moment and the momentum. This is a time when the world economy is facing headwinds. You know, everybody's very bullish about India. According to you, sir, what makes India's story so special?
You know, India always had a huge potential for growth. And that potential was based primarily on the quality of the people of India. I think there is no question, and nobody anywhere, I think, will question that if you look at the average intelligence of people anywhere in the world, Indians are amongst the most intelligent people that you will find on the globe. Indian people have a great commitment to hard work. If it wasn't for that,
Right.
you wouldn't have had the kind of resilience which Indians have shown over all kinds of adversities over centuries.
Yes, sir.
And if you combine intelligence with hard work, with the fact that God has endowed us with very fertile land, with a climate which permits you to grow 3 crops a year, which very few countries in the world have. We have all the ingredients for a rapid economic growth.
Right.
Unfortunately, it didn't happen for a long time. But why the world has become very bullish now is because over the last 10 years, the whole system has changed. And now people find that there are really no fetters on them for growing to the full potential.
Mr. Bhargava, you know, obviously the last decade has been a decade of momentum, and we're all, you know, so cognizant of it. But for India to truly be Viksit Bharat and that $30 trillion target that all of us are aspire to meet, you know, it will take about 9 to 10% growth sustained over the next at least decade or more. Are we ready for that? It's good to have that, you know, aspiration and that, you know, dream to go to $30 trillion, but we haven't grown at that pace. The world hasn't grown at that pace. And how do we, you know, actually make it happen? Especially when manufacturing, which leads the global agenda in growth, is not the strongest point. Of course, there is an exception like Maruti, which you showcase.
You know, Rakesh, we have to get rid of a lot of baggage which we have accumulated over 60 years. And that is taking time. And that baggage is in terms not only of the entire systems of laws and regulations and practices, it's the way we have trained our bureaucracy to function, it's the way we've trained a lot of people in this country to think
Yes,
of
sir.
how business should be done. And we are no longer able to say, at least even now, I think, that business people think more about...
Yeah.
Sir, may I
keep it
request
close.
you to hold
Think
the
more about their company's growth and they think more about the fact that they need to find ways in which they can accumulate wealth for themselves. Because for a lot of decades, growth was not possible, taxation were very high, and people therefore optimized that by saying, why worry about the company growth? Let the company be at a certain level. We will accumulate our wealth. I think that attitudes have to change. And I think the younger people, the younger generation in India is changing that. And that is one of the factors, I think, which will sustain us when you're saying over the next few decades.
Yeah.
The younger generation and their attitudes.
Mr. Bhargav, you know, your book, The Maruti Story, you're talking about change and how the young will have to sustain that change. You know, you built a company. After all, a company is not built just with brick and mortar. It requires a lot of blood, sweat, tears, passion, love, etc., etc. You know, getting approvals, putting things in place. We always heard about license Raj. We heard about red tapeism, which was always a glut for all of us to go forward. But this particular dispensation, as it were, the government and the entire system, it encourages entrepreneurship. You know, so tell us, what does the future look like for India from now on?
I can't see any country in the world today, any country of any size in the world today, which has better prospects for the future than India has. I cannot see the Western world has reached a certain level where I think growth is now a dicey matter. Whether they grow or they will get into recession and things. People have lost that ethos of working. People want a much more luxurious kind of life. They want good things to come without working. And in India today, people are aspiring to greatly improve not only their own future, but the future of their families and their children in the future. And that hunger is going to drive India forward, which very few countries can match.
Brilliant.
Mr. Bhargav, you know, Maruti, of course, is a great example, which we cite as a great Make in India success story. One way of looking at it is that while Maruti has been a great success, we haven't been able to truly replicate that success across sectors, not necessarily just in the auto sector. But the truth of the matter is that Maruti is essentially foreign-owned. It's a Japanese-owned company. Does ownership have a role, especially in the context of India bringing in Atmanirbhar Bharat? So, you know, how do you look at the Atmanirbhar perspective and this Make in India context, given the Maruti template?
So I'm not quite sure if I have understood what you're saying. But in Maruti, I think the major factor was the fact that all of us had no other agenda except the growth of the company. We were focused on how to grow this company because whether it was Mr. Krishnamurti, he was at the end of his career. I had left the IAS and I had joined this, so I had no other way except to try and make a success of what I was doing here. Mr. Suzuki in Japan had gambled the future of Suzuki Japan on the Indian venture, where everybody thought that this was not going to be a success and he was going to go down. So I think there was a great deal of motivation all round to do things in the right way and not worry about personal things.
No, I was talking about the ownership. You know, is foreign ownership still an issue in India?
You know, ownership doesn't really matter. At that time when we started, government was a 74% owner. But I found, and I had worked for long in government, that government rules permit you a great deal of latitude to do things differently, but still remain within the rules. This belief that government rules are frightfully rigid and they don't permit you to change, I think stands disproved by the fact that within the Maruti system, if you look at all that we did, and I've described a lot of that in my latest book, Impossible to Possible, we have done a whole lot of changes in the management structure, all remaining within the government rule system.
Interesting. Yeah, so
And you know, the Maruti story, I'm going back to the first book. And
Sorry?
the first book, the
Yeah,
Maruti story,
story.
sir, you've been always a great votary of teamwork. You thought that people-to-people contact, you know, how you interact with each other, that builds a company, takes it several notches above. With the digitization, sir, and artificial intelligence, how is it going to impact when we talk about manufacturing, product design, et cetera, et cetera? It's a new world out there. What's your opinion on that, Mr. Bhargava?
You know, ultimately, in any organization, it is the people who make the difference. In a lot of organizations like IT companies and all, everybody is very homogeneous in the sense that they're all engineers and they're all technocrats and things. And so they all work more or less as a team. In manufacturing, unfortunately, we have this, I'm not sure where this has come from, but it has come that people who are less educated are not the same as us. And we have a kind of superiority complex that if we are better educated, we have all the know-how, and the people who are less educated do not have that kind of know-how. It's totally wrong. Actually, the workers in a factory, and they are about 70% of the total employees, have as much interest in or motivation, if they are motivated correctly, to improve the factory, and they have the capability of doing this because by virtue of the experience which they get by working on the shop floor. The challenge for management or people who are in the higher positions is to respect people as people and to recognize that these people also have the same aspirations as we have. They also want to get a better life for themselves and their children. And if you create conditions where they can see that happening, they will work with full devotion to the company.
Yeah, that's the work integrity that we are talking about, which is extremely important to the success of the India growth story. Mr. Bhargav, there is by and large broad consensus on the economic reforms in this country. Post-liberalization, there is a direction and a trajectory which stays the course. But there is a strong section in the political class which still sees capital with a sense of suspicion. And you have constantly been arguing in favor of, investing faith in wealth creators as the potentially only viable, durable solution to improve equitable growth in this country. So how does one deal with the level of, distrust in corporate world yet in this country?
Rakesh, somehow I'm able to follow her better than I can follow you.
Maybe the mic is faulty, sir. Could be, no?
Yeah. No, Mr. Bhargav, let me just, speak a little slowly. I was saying that we've come a long way and there is political consensus on economic reforms and there is a broad trajectory when it comes to the growth story. But there is still a large section in the political class which feels, even in the, which feels that the capital has not to be trusted with the same amount of, there is suspicion around capital. Private sector investments are seen as with some amount of suspicion. And you have been arguing for greater trust of faith in wealth creators. And you've been arguing, saying that that is the only way to build equitable growth in this country. So how does one solve this challenge that is coming across to the corporate world in India?
See, Rakesh, we have, even when we started our development in 1950, the logic behind the system of central planning and all was that we were a resource-scarce country. That hasn't changed that much. We are still, as you're saying, the private sector is short of resources to invest. Companies are not generating enough internal resources to finance the kind of growth which is possible today. The reason for that also is that we have followed a lot of the Western practices in management. We have not developed our Indian style of management, which should be, and Indian style is basically much more frugal. If companies are managed more frugally and you avoid a lot of unnecessary expenditures, which happens because that's the Western pattern, you can actually accumulate far more resources than you think is possible. I'm talking of Maruti. We followed a very frugal management style. We have been able to finance our growth from the original 100,000 cars to 22 lakh cars, which is about 21 times our original capacity, all from resources generated internally. We did not borrow, we did not have to go to anybody for money. We will double this to 4 million, again without raising money from anybody. We don't go to banks, we don't go to the stock market, we don't go anywhere for money. And with all that we have done till now, we have 50,000 crores of cash reserves. So it's not that companies cannot have money. It's the style of management which will make the difference.
That's brilliant. And on that note, Mr. Bhargav, it's been a pleasure. It's an honor to have spoken to you. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for a legend, R.C. Bhargav. It's our honor truly to have listened to you, sir. Sir, if I may help.